Chinese state media has released a CGI video showcasing what it describes as a massive space warship concept, a triangular craft depicted cruising above the Earth, firing missiles, and launching swarms of unmanned jets into near space. The concept, named Luanniao, has set off global commentary not because it represents an operational weapons system, but because of what it signals about China's long-term ambitions and the political context in which it was unveiled. The CGI surfaced as U.S.-China tensions over Taiwan were intensifying, fueling speculation about whether the timing was deliberate. The release has raised the question of whether this is a preview of future warfare or a calculated exercise in psychological messaging. The Luanniao is depicted as an enormous platform designed to operate in the stratosphere, approximately 30 kilometers above the Earth's surface in the gray zone between traditional aircraft and orbital vehicles. State-linked coverage attached headline dimensions to the CGI, including almost 800 feet in length, a wingspan of 684 meters, and a takeoff weight of approximately 120,000 tons. Those figures should be treated as conceptual rather than engineering specifications, but if taken at face value, they would dwarf any current ocean-going warship, including the largest aircraft carriers in service today. Some coverage ties the concept to AVIC, China's state-owned aerospace conglomerate, though there is no clear public evidence of an active build program. Chinese outlets frame it under the Nantianmen project, which envisions an integrated airspace system operating from conventional runways to low Earth orbit. The Nantianmen concept is presented as a long-term airspace vision representing China's ambition to erase the boundary between atmospheric and space operations. Rather than treating aircraft and spacecraft as separate categories with separate capabilities, the framework imagines a seamless continuum in which vehicles take off from conventional airfields, ascend through the atmosphere, operate at stratospheric or even orbital altitudes, and return to land on standard runways. If realized, such a system would fundamentally challenge the way military forces are organized, since current doctrine treats air power and space power as distinct domains with separate command structures, platforms, and doctrines. According to Chinese state media descriptions, the CGI narrative describes the Luanniao as a mothership launching up to 88 Shennu unmanned combat platforms, depicted as stealthy and highly maneuverable, including hypersonic strike scenarios from the edge of the atmosphere. The operational concept presented in the video depicts the craft positioning itself above a theater of operations, at altitudes that Chinese state media suggests would complicate many existing air defense systems, and striking targets below with coordinated swarms of autonomous drones and missiles. The narrative presented by Chinese media is one of a platform that could fundamentally alter the dynamics of air warfare by operating at altitudes where current defense systems cannot effectively engage. It is worth noting that the concept of stratospheric military platforms is not exclusively Chinese. The United States has experimented with high-altitude long-endurance platforms, including high-altitude long-endurance platforms, including Airbus's Zephyr and DARPA's past Vulture program, designed to loiter at altitudes above 20 kilometers for weeks or months. DARPA has funded research into reusable spaceplanes and hypersonic vehicles that could operate in the upper atmosphere, but none of these programs approach anything close to the scale the Luanniao envisions. The American programs have focused on relatively small, lightweight platforms designed for surveillance and communications, not on a 120,000-ton vehicle carrying 88 combat drones. The gap between what currently exists in any country's research portfolio and what the Luanniao video depicts is not a gap that can be closed incrementally. It would require fundamental breakthroughs in multiple fields simultaneously. The critical question, however, is how much of this is real and how much is theater. Defense expert Peter Layton, who has been widely cited in international coverage of the concept, has argued that the CGI outpaces today's demonstrated technology. He noted that for external audiences, the video paints a picture that China is working on technology that the region simply cannot aspire to, describing it as literally Star Wars stuff. But Layton also emphasized that the advanced propulsion systems, materials, and power generation capabilities required for a vehicle of 120,000 tons operating in the stratosphere simply do not exist today at an operational level. Analysts say the full combination of propulsion, materials, and energy implied by the CGI is not currently demonstrated at that scale by any country. The propulsion challenge alone is staggering. Keeping a 120,000-ton vehicle aloft in the stratosphere would require engines that produce extraordinary sustained thrust while operating in an environment with minimal atmospheric density. Current jet engines lose efficiency dramatically above 20 kilometers. Scramjet and ramjet technologies, while promising for smaller hypersonic vehicles, have never been demonstrated at the scale the Luanniao would require. The materials challenge is equally daunting. The airframe would need to withstand extreme temperature differentials, radiation exposure, and aerodynamic stresses at stratospheric altitudes while remaining light enough to be aerodynamically viable. And the energy requirements for sustaining flight, powering weapon systems, launching and recovering 88 drones, and maintaining communications would demand power generation capabilities that do not exist in any current military or civilian application. Layton's assessment captures the duality of the announcement. If such a platform were ever built, it would, in his words, surpass practically everyone. But that conditional is doing enormous work. Chinese media have themselves suggested that something like the Luanniao could become realistic in a horizon of 20 to 30 years, framing it as a long-term vision rather than an immediate program. Other analysts have noted that while several of the individual technological building blocks are real, including fast drones, artificial intelligence, and stratospheric platforms, integrating them into a single vehicle of this scale is far beyond current engineering capabilities anywhere in the world. The distinction between concept and capability matters because it determines how the announcement should be interpreted. Some analysts have described the Luanniao as a trailer for the war of the future rather than a weapons program in a prototype phase, a piece of strategic communication designed to achieve specific political and psychological objectives rather than a progress report on actual hardware development. The CGI video, produced with high production values and distributed through state media channels, functions simultaneously as domestic propaganda to feed national pride and reinforce the narrative that China leads the next generation of aerospace warfare, and as an external signaling tool that suggests Beijing is thinking about scenarios in which it dominates near-Earth space and can project power over regions like the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea from practically unreachable altitudes. Critics have pointed out that the timing of the release, in the midst of heightened tensions with the United States and active debates about advanced weaponry, reinforces the psychological character of the message rather than representing a genuine hardware announcement. The video appeared just days after a phone call between Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump, after which China's official readout emphasized Taiwan as the most sensitive issue, a sequence that multiple analysts interpreted as deliberate. China's approach to information warfare has become increasingly sophisticated in recent years. The People's Liberation Army's doctrine of systems confrontation explicitly includes what it calls cognitive domain operations, the use of information, media, and psychological messaging to shape adversary perceptions and decision-making before, during, and after military operations. The Luanniao video fits squarely within this framework. It is not a leaked prototype or an accidental disclosure. It is a carefully produced piece of strategic communication released through official channels at a politically significant moment, designed to achieve specific effects on specific audiences. Understanding it as such does not diminish its importance. If anything, it makes the video more significant because it reveals how Beijing is thinking about the relationship between technology, perception, and power. In a recent Xi-Trump call, China's official readout placed the Taiwan issue at the top of the agenda. Xi Jinping told Trump that Taiwan is the most sensitive and volatile issue in U.S.-China relations and warned that Washington must handle arms sales to the island with extreme caution. He stated that China will not tolerate any moves toward what Beijing describes as the separation of Taiwan, and that China is prepared to safeguard its sovereignty and territorial integrity by any means necessary. The language was direct and left little room for diplomatic ambiguity. Beijing considers Taiwan a core interest on which there is no room for compromise. The immediate trigger for the heightened tensions was Washington's approval in December of an arms package for Taiwan that international reporting described as the largest U.S.-Taiwan arms notification in a single tranche. The sale includes advanced missiles and support systems designed to enhance Taiwan's defensive capabilities against a potential Chinese military operation. For Beijing, the arms sale represents a direct violation of the understanding it believes underpins the U.S.-China relationship, that Washington acknowledges Beijing's position on Taiwan and will not take actions that undermine China's sovereignty claims over the island. Each new arms package, from Beijing's perspective, moves the situation situation closer to a red line that China has said it will enforce. Trump, for his part, described the call with Xi as long and excellent, according to U.S. media reports, even as the underlying differences over Taiwan remain unresolved. The characterization is consistent with Trump's approach to relationships with leaders of rival powers, in which personal rapport is emphasized while structural disagreements persist. The fact that both leaders described the call in positive terms while maintaining fundamentally incompatible positions on Taiwan illustrates the tension at the heart of the relationship. Both sides want to manage the competition, but neither is willing to concede on the issue that matters most. The United States remains Taiwan's primary arms supplier despite maintaining formal diplomatic relations with Beijing under the One China policy, a diplomatic arrangement that has managed the contradiction since 1979, but that is under increasing strain. Beijing has warned repeatedly that continued arms sales to Taiwan constitute interference in China's internal affairs and a violation of commitments made in 3 joint communiques between the two countries. Washington argues that the Taiwan Relations Act requires the United States to provide Taiwan with the defensive capabilities it needs, and that arms sales are consistent with long-standing policy. The fundamental disagreement has not been resolved in nearly 50 years, and the current round of tensions suggests it may be growing more acute rather than less. Taiwan's leadership has responded by reiterating that the relationship with the United States remains, in their words, rock solid, and that military and political cooperation will continue to deepen. Taipei has consistently maintained that its security depends on the continued commitment of the United States to provide defensive weapons and to maintain the kind of ambiguous but functional security relationship that has kept the peace in the Taiwan Strait for decades. The $11 billion arms package was seen in Taipei as a strong signal of that commitment, even as it provoked Beijing's sharpest rhetoric in months. The December arms package is notable not only for its size, but for its composition. Multiple outlets reported the package includes long-range rockets, missiles, drones, and support systems, though specific details vary by notification. The emphasis is on capabilities designed to deter an amphibious assault and improve Taiwan's ability to sustain operations during a prolonged conflict. The emphasis on anti-access and area denial capabilities reflects a shift in Taiwan's defense strategy from matching China's military dollar for dollar, which is no longer possible given the disparity in defense spending, to making the island so costly to invade that Beijing concludes the military option is not worth the price. This strategy, sometimes described as the porcupine doctrine, depends on having enough advanced weapons to inflict unacceptable casualties on an invading force. The Luanniao concept video must be understood within this specific context. It is not a random technology demonstration. It is a piece of strategic communication released at a moment when China is simultaneously warning the United States about Taiwan, objecting to a record arms sale, and signaling to the region that it is developing capabilities that could render current defense arrangements obsolete in the long term. The fact that the technology does not currently exist does not diminish the political effectiveness of the message. What matters is that Beijing wants its audiences, both domestic and international, to believe that this is the direction in which Chinese military technology is heading, and that countries in the region should adjust their strategic calculations accordingly. The broader trend that the Luanniao concept fits into is real, even if the specific platform is not. China has made substantial investments in drone technology, artificial intelligence, hypersonic weapons, and stratospheric platforms. The country has tested hypersonic glide vehicles that the Pentagon has described as concerning. It has deployed increasingly sophisticated drone swarms in military exercises. It has launched space-based surveillance and communication systems that provide the kind of persistent monitoring that would be necessary for the type of integrated airspace warfare the Luanniao concept envisions. The individual building blocks, in other words, are being developed. The question is whether they can be assembled into the kind of revolutionary platform that the CGI video depicts, and the honest answer from the engineering community is that nobody knows when or if that will be possible. For the United States, the challenge posed by the Luanniao concept is less about the specific platform than about the strategic direction it represents. If China is genuinely pursuing the ability to operate military systems at stratospheric altitudes above the effective ceiling of most current air defense systems, it would require a fundamental rethinking of how the U.S. military defends its assets and allies in the Pacific. Current defense architectures are designed around threats that operate within the atmosphere or in orbit. A platform operating in the gap between the two would exploit a vulnerability that no existing system is designed to address. Even if the Luanniao itself never flies, the concept identifies a domain of warfare that the United States and its allies will need to consider in their long-term planning. The Pentagon has already begun investing in counter-hypersonic capabilities and space-based interceptors, recognizing that threats are migrating toward higher altitudes and faster speeds. The Missile Defense Agency is developing systems designed to detect and intercept hypersonic weapons, and the Space Force has been given an expanded mandate to protect U.S. interests in the space domain. But the stratospheric gap, the altitude band between approximately 20 and 100 kilometers, where neither traditional aircraft nor orbital systems operate effectively, remains largely unaddressed in current defense planning. The Luanniao concept, whether intentionally or not, highlights this vulnerability and suggests that China is at least thinking about how to exploit it. The Taiwan dimension adds urgency to these calculations. The $11 billion arms package approved in December is designed to address current and near-term threats, anti-ship missiles, air defense systems, and surveillance capabilities that would make a Chinese amphibious assault on Taiwan more costly. But if China's long-term trajectory includes platforms that operate above the effective range of these systems, the defensive calculus changes fundamentally. Taiwan's defensive strategy is built on the assumption that it can make an invasion prohibitively expensive using conventional weapons. A platform that operates from 30 kilometers above the island, launching drone swarms and hypersonic missiles from altitudes that ground-based defenses cannot reach, would undermine that assumption entirely, even if such a platform is decades away from realization. This is precisely the psychological effect that Beijing appears to be seeking. By presenting the Luanniao concept now, at a moment of peak tension over Taiwan and immediately after a record U.S. arms sale, China is suggesting that the weapons Washington is selling to Taipei may be irrelevant in the time frame that matters. The message to Taiwan's population and leadership is that American weapons cannot guarantee security against the kind of capabilities China is developing. The message to the United States is that the arms race in the Pacific is entering a domain where Washington's current advantages may not apply. And the message to the region is that China is thinking about warfare on a scale and at altitudes that no other country in Asia is currently even conceptualizing. For countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, and the Philippines, all of which have security arrangements with the United States and potential exposure to Chinese military action in their immediate vicinity, the Luanniao concept raises questions about the long-term viability of their defense strategies. If the trajectory of Chinese military technology is toward platforms that operate above the ceiling of current defense systems, the weapons and alliances these countries depend on today may not provide adequate security in the decades ahead. That uncertainty, even more than the specific platform depicted in the video, is the strategic effect Beijing is pursuing. Whether that message is backed by genuine capability or is primarily an exercise in strategic bluffing is the central question that defense analysts will be debating for years. The answer is probably that it is both. China has demonstrated real progress in the technologies that would be necessary for stratospheric warfare. It has also demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of how to use information, including CGI videos distributed through state media, as a weapon in its own right. The Luanniao may never fly, but the political and psychological effects of its unveiling are already being felt in defense ministries and intelligence agencies across the Pacific. In the contest between Beijing and Washington over the future of Taiwan and the balance of power in Asia, the battle for perception may prove just as consequential as the battle for hardware. And on that front, with a single CGI video, China has ensured that the world is watching. The Luanniao video will be studied in war colleges, intelligence agencies, and defense ministries, not for its engineering specifications, which remain entirely theoretical, but for what it reveals about how Beijing thinks about the future of warfare and how it uses information as a strategic weapon. In an era where the battle for narrative dominance can shape alliance decisions, defense budgets, and public perceptions of security, a well-produced CGI video distributed at exactly the right political moment can achieve effects that